Hello and welcome to this tutorial on sizing. My name's Anthony, and in this video we'll be going through everything you need to know to size your objects correctly in FixFlow. There are several different ways we can apply sizing in FixFlow. We can use fixed sizes, whereby we set a width and a height for a particular object. We can use proportional sizes, therefore we would use something like a percentage or a calculated value to set the width of an object or the height of an object. We can rely on what's called auto size, and that works in conjunction with Flexbox to allow objects to take up the available space. And finally, we can also push the size of an object based on the size of its children. Let's look at how we apply these. Here we have an example dashboard, and on it we have 4 areas equally spaced out. Now as it stands, it doesn't look great, and we can't see all the content in the first tile, and maybe some of the other tiles are probably larger than we need them to be. So let's start by adding a specific size to our comment section. To do this, we need to select the tile and open its properties. Now we can give the tile a specific width, and set a height. Now the width and height can also be applied using CSS properties or a shared style. Next, let's look at adding some proportional sizes. So we'll do the same thing, but this time we'll add a percentage rather than a pixel size. So let's select our first tile, and we'll give this a width of 75%. And now we can see that first tile has taken up 75% of the available space, causing the rest of the content to be shifted down to the next row. Now the reason this has happened is to do with Flexbox. We'll be covering this in more detail in a separate video. I've removed the auto sizing from the 2 tiles at the bottom so we can understand what will happen when we apply it. Now auto size relies on the parent object having a Flexbox set, and what auto size will do is consume the available space from the parent. So let's see that here. So I've set the auto size for the tabs tile, and here we can see it's consumed the available space. Now it hasn't consumed all of the space because the map here has a minimum width, so it won't go beyond those proportions. Now if I set the auto size on the map, what we'll see is that 2 tiles share the available space. Now what's important to note is when you're using auto size, the tiles or any object will only grow in the direction of the flex from the parent. So for example here, our parent object, the tile container, is set to row, and therefore our objects will grow in the row. Now not all objects will need to be the same size, and for that reason we have the option of a growth factor. So if we go into our tabs component here and scroll down, we'll see just below auto size we have growth factor, and if we set this to 2, we'll see that our tabs tile is now twice the size of our map. So the final mechanism for sizing that I'd like to discuss with you in this video is where we use the child objects to push the size of the parent object. So this is very useful when you have an unknown number of fields perhaps and you want to expand an area to accommodate those. So first of all, we can select the container area, and this is set to auto size, and that's why it's taking up all this available space. But what I want to show you is if we go into one of these areas and we were to place all other areas inside it, what happens here is that the first area, area 1, if we select that we'll see it highlighted, has expanded to accommodate the size of the children inside it. Now to further illustrate this, if I make one of these other areas much higher, we can see area 1 is still in the background, but it's been expanded to contain this content. Now very often what happens is people use the auto size, assuming that the area will automatically size to house the content, and that's not always the case because the content may go beyond the available space, in which case we'd use this mechanism and use some scroll bars. So what I want to show you now is just some practical examples of this and things that you need to consider when sizing our objects. Now the example we can see on screen, the tile in the bottom left hand corner, I've added some more fields to, and you can see here that they've expanded beyond the boundaries of the tile. And that's because the tile content container is set to auto size. So there are various things that we can do to sort this out. The simple and easiest thing to do would be to go to the tile content container. And here we can set the show vertical scroll bar. And what this will do is hide the fields that went beyond the tile container and put them behind a scroll bar. So now when we scroll, we'll see those additional fields. Now this may or may not be useful for you, depends on the circumstances that you're designing for. However, we've been looking at getting the child objects to expand the parent object. So in order to do that in this scenario, we would remove the vertical scroll bar and would also remove the auto size. And now what we can see has happened is the content has actually pushed the size of the tile for us. So that's how you get the tile to resize to fit the content. Now a common misconception is that you use auto size to do this, as the name would suggest it automatically sizes for the content, but it doesn't. Remember, auto size only takes the available space, whereas if you turn that off and rely on the child objects to push, then the size here will increase to accommodate the fields. Now something to consider here is that if we rely upon the child objects to expand our area, we don't have as much control over our design as maybe we'd like to. However, we can constrain the proportions of our areas, in this case it's a tile, using a min, max, height and width. So we can set those if we feel as though our tile is going to get too large. Maybe we've got too many fields to show on one tile on one page. Another alternative would be to have the actual page expand itself and have a scroll bar on that, so our tiles will resize to house the content, but we could also increase the size of maybe our grid and our comments so that we can see more content there. And that could be set up something like this. So that brings us to the end of the video on sizing. I hope you found it useful. Thanks for watching.